Multiverse Comics, your super comic shop. We find what you need, we have what you want. From a brand new book to the back issue you need. From Marvel Independence, Image or DC. If there's a collection you just have to sell, Multiverse will help with that as well. For the hottest picks, come and see us. Multiverse Comics. Up and away!
Hey everybody, we're back again. It is a Thursday today, so I don't know what day of the week you're going to be listening to this, but as of the recording, it is a Thursday on July the 13th is the initial day that we're doing that. You just heard our jingle that I really, really enjoy. That's going to be turned into a nice little commercial so people can see it on the television and on the YouTubes and all that fun stuff to try to get us some more feet through the door, because that's what keeps us going. It's what keeps the podcasts running. That's what keeps the doors open, the electric on, and food in my stomach. Lord knows I like to eat. So, welcome to another episode of what I've been calling the Angry Businessman. Again, my name is Mick. I own a small business called Multiverse Comics, and this is all about all of our observations and dealings with the business world, the comic book industry, how government affects us, and just life in general, and what I'm going to even say is the general patriotic feel of what we observe and what we see here out of the store specifically. Again, I want to warn anybody listening to this podcast, there may be material that you don't agree with, that you are offended by, which is not our initial goal. Our initial goal here is for me to talk about everything that affects the way these businesses are ran, specifically mine, the way the industry and just the general mood of the country now is currently affecting business in multiple ways, as well as just general observations. Now, there may be material that you don't agree with, that you were offended by, that you would like to say something. Again, that is perfectly fine. I will have a conversation with anybody that wants to have a conversation with. Be more than happy to listen to your point of view. However, I do not care for the keyboard crusaders who just want to get on the internet and be trolls and blast people and all that fun stuff. If you're going to be overly emotional and can't hold yourself together, I don't need to talk to you, because your opinions aren't valid because you're too emotional. You come at me with, facts and things to support what we're talking about, and, we'll listen to you. We'll have a conversation. You may even change my mind on some points. I'm not opposed to that by any means. Adopt, adapt, and improve, they always say. The motto of the round table. So, So today, a couple of different things that I wanted to specifically talk about. One of them being glimpses of hope, which seems to be in short supply these days. I feel like every time that we turn on the TV, turn on the YouTubes or anything else, all you hear is nothing but doom and gloom, and that's from both sides, left and right. I mean, the president gets on TV on July 4th and talks about how bad the country is and all that fun stuff, and then, excuse me. So, we've got a lot of doom and gloom out there. And, this is also one of those points that I don't know that I've made on the show before, but I've said in the past, and I may be repeating myself. But to me, these comics, these stories, even when you go into, television shows and the sort of thing that has material related to, or like Star Trek and that sort of thing. These are supposed to be inspirational stories and things that you should be looking forward to, and that, you know, pick you up and make you feel like you should, you know, be working towards a common greater goal. And in some of this stuff, in the last few weeks, I'll be reading some of this stuff or watching some of these shows, and they hammer so hard on all this stuff that just brings everybody down, that everybody's tired of hearing about, and, you know, being told that, you know, where you live is a terrible place and all this stuff. But every once in a while comes along a moment in one of these things where somebody says something, and you hear that little glimmer of hope back in the material. And I go, okay, it's still there. They still kind of get it. They don't really know, but it's at least hinted at that there is still hope for the future and hope to do better. And it took them 6 episodes of the new Miss Marvel show to hint on that. I'm not going to say I was a major fan of the show by any means. I have problems with the show from beginning. And I say this as looking at the material and what they did with it. First of all, outside of younger kids, I don't know any avid comic book readers that are of an adult age that find the current Miss Marvel, Kamala Khan, a super cool character. I feel she's about a C-lister on the strings here. You know, you got multiple tiers of characters, and she, to me, is at least it's a C to D tier, right? You got your Captain America and your Iron Man and your Hulk and your Thor, you know, those guys. You got your street level guys like Daredevils and those type of dudes, and then you get into the sidekicks and unheard ofs and just general bad characters that nobody really cares for. I feel that this current Miss Marvel is in that C to D range. Just because she's not that interesting of a comic book character, she's really... So, in the comics, she is an Inhuman. Okay? Which is kind of like a mutant, but kind of not. There's a mutation in their genetics, but they have to be exposed to this stuff that gives them their superpowers or whatever. So they're almost a mutant, but almost not. And her power set is really similar to, but a limited similar to Mr. Fantastic, right? So like she can kind of stretch a little bit, and she can kind of make herself bigger, you know, and that's the whole thing. So I'd like to know how the conversation went as far as trying to get this character a TV show. Because, again, I feel like the concepts were just trying to be diverse for the sake of being diverse. Because we know in the concept, the creation of this character was pandering to a political individual, right? We come up with this character. We named her after the current vice president when she was still, you know, a senator or whatever. Whoop-de-doo. You know, okay. Look at me, virtue signal, pat me on the back. I named a new superhero after you. Never mind that pretty much everything that you do for the country is making it worse. You know, and especially when you get on camera in front of people, you can't stop laughing like the Joker. Like, it's just... it's pandering to try to get recognition. Okay, so what happens when we get to the show? Well, so let's say we want to do the show for Miss Marvel. Yay! Cool. The comic book sales are not great for this character. We had her in an Avengers game that flopped, and she was basically the main character in that. So why would we want to try to push a TV show when every time we put something out for this character, it tanks out real hard? Okay, so whatever. Let's do one. Well, the show that they did for the Inhumans that was on ABC tanked real hard. So they don't want to call her an Inhuman because that would associate her with the show, right? Well, and then Disney's going to go, well, I mean, she's kind of got Mr. Fantastic powers. Like, we don't want to confuse the non-comic book people. Again, and this is also my question is, why do we care about the people who aren't fans of this material anyway, and we're trying to push it? Because the people who aren't into the comics and stuff are not going to be the ones that are watching these TV shows. They might go to the movies and watch all the movies because the movies are, colorful and blowing up stuff and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But they'll go into these movies that have the shows that interlink the movies, and they'll be completely blind because, well, they didn't care and or know that things were on Disney to link the shows together to watch them. Which is what the fans do. Right? Like the comic book people. This is like the way for them to actually see the properties that they wanted to see generally. Finally come to life in something, and then they train wreck it. So okay, so we can't make her like Mr. Fantastic. We can't make her an Inhuman. So why not just pick a different character? If you can't do the character, why not just go, you know what? This isn't going to work. Let's try a different character. But not in this case. In this case, we went, well, because Disney has a mandate about diversity, we got to go ahead and push this one. So let's give her some kind of a magical bracelet that kind of simulates the powers that she has, but it's made of hard light like a Green Lantern ring. DC's Green Lantern stuff flopped. Maybe we can get a Miss Marvel that's kind of the same type of thing and, beat them to the punch. So that's what they did, right? So we get this version of Miss Marvel that is not really Miss Marvel that makes hard light constructs. Very crude hard light constructs. And then we pull a villain group that nobody's heard of since the 90s to be her opposition and kind of change the way that stuff works. And nothing really happens in every single episode. We use our powers maybe once, and I'm guessing due to budget constraints. And we save it all for the end finale, which the majority of the end finale had, some power usage and stuff. And the whole time I'm thinking, this feels like a show off of the CW. It's full of teen angst. It's definitely geared towards a younger crowd, which is supposed to be able to identify it. But the problem is, kids in New York might identify with some of this stuff, especially, Pakistani kids or, whatever, because half of the show takes place in a mosque, and, there's some time travel-y stuff and all that fun stuff, and which is fine. But the majority of the country isn't going to identify with this because the majority of the country isn't a large city. I'm not saying Jersey City is a large city, but I mean it's it's still a city, and it's taken place in gigantic high schools. Now, I know the high school that my child goes to, probably has 2,000 kids in it or something. The high school that I graduated from, and I mean the entire high school, 9th to 12th grade, had just over 200 kids in it when I graduated. My graduating class was like 50 kids. Okay. So, and there's a lot of places around the country that are pretty rural like that don't have giant graduating classes and, schools with more than a couple hundred kids in them. That's just the way it works. So a lot of this, I don't necessarily know that a lot of these teens are going to relate to this show. I might be wrong on this. This is, again, just my perspective from the area to which I live in. Was it colorful and all that fun stuff, and the graphics were all right, and some of the CGI for her was a little weird and off. But we get down to the end of the show, and they finally get to say some things that makes me go, you know what? Maybe in the end, after all of this stuff, I'm going to be okay with everything because of the messages they push at the end. And I don't even know if half of these guys writing this stuff even realize what they're saying half the time. Or maybe they do and they just don't realize the total implications of it. But at one point, Kamala and her dad are sitting on a roof and they're talking. And this was after the big fights and all that fun stuff. And he says something along the lines of, if you saved one life, then you've done your job. Because everybody's worth saving. Something along those lines, right? Like, if you saved one life, then you can save the world, or something like that, Glimmer of hope. Boom, right there it is. Can't believe it came out of their mouth. Because if you look at the way that Kamala is portrayed in this, is she's just a kid that just wants to have superpowers, to have meaning in her life and all this stuff. And she just needs these things so she can be special. Right? I mean, it's almost a supervillain story, right? Like, I'm so focused on me, I need power to be important. I mean, her story of beginning to be a superhero, especially in this TV show, is not the traditional story of somebody gaining powers and choosing to do the right thing. Like, she wanted to do this. This was her whole thing in life. She was so wrapped up in it that she just had to do it. Unlike somebody who either was a mutant or born, develops powers through a certain age and is an outcast in society, but says, you know what, instead of, I'm going to take my difference that I've got and I'm going to try to make a difference so everybody gets along. Or, what, I got sent here as a baby and I have these things that that can do. I'll do them to try to help everybody that I can help out. Because, that's who I really am. I guess Booster Gold's probably the closest thing on the DC side I can think to her, of Kamala at this point, and he wants to be a hero so bad that he goes back in time to try to be one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how I feel about that, because again, it's almost similar to some of the stories for supervillains on how they, had to have powers to feel important, except for, Kamala chooses to help people as opposed to just help herself. I could almost argue the point that she is helping herself. That's how she feels important, right? Like, these other guys feel like it's obligation and duty that they have duty to society to try to help society, and this is the way that they can help, right? Like, everybody should have some sort of a goal or a focus to be able to get to that says, I want to make the world a better place. How can I help do that? What do I have available to help make that a better place, right? And then you take what you have and you go with it. And then if you succeed, awesome. But, like, that's not generally, I feel like, how most of these heroes have defined themselves and self-worth. This is, a lot of times it's mainly a burden on them to do this, and some of them want to quit. Like Spider-Man tries to quit like every couple of weeks. But because he has these things, he feels that there's a responsibility to continue to do them. And it wasn't something that he wanted from the beginning. Now, sometimes they go back and try to say, well, he used to read Captain America comics, and when he grew up, he wanted to be a superhero like Captain America. Well, that's what little kids do, right? Like, when I was 3 and 4, I'm sure I was running around the yard with a cape tied around my neck and, blowing things away with my super breath. I mean, it's just the way it worked. But I don't feel like, I think that's the big distinction between her and every other hero that they've done, is that she's just so obsessed with these heroes that she has to have these powers in order to be able to make a difference. Otherwise, she doesn't feel that she's, a good enough person, which she could have done other things, like the other people in her life, to try to do things to make things better for people, and she didn't need the powers to do that. But again, another philosophical conversation that I should probably have with an individual other than myself, so that we can at least get a different perspective. Just my thought. So the other thing that has popped up this week is the new Thor movie dropped last Friday, the Love and Thunder, and I'm sure everybody on the internet's going crazy and talking about it. I haven't seen it yet. I haven't had time to be able to go do that. Hopefully I'll get some time to do that. We're currently prepping for another show about a week from Friday, so about a week and a half out. We have a 2-day show that we're doing in Dayton, Ohio, Gym City Cons. If anybody's in the area and would like to go, I highly suggest that you go. It's one of the best shows that we do every year. The people that run it are absolutely wonderful. They do a really good job of making sure everybody has a good booth, everything looks good, and there's a lot of really good vendors. So get out and check it out. There'll be artist alleys. There's a lot of artists out there that could use you guys buying a couple of prints from them to help them out. And plus, their stuff's really good. And a lot of cool people show up, and it's a really good time. So if you're a toy guy or a comic book guy or whatever, show up to Dayton and have a good time for 2 days. So I'm going to be locked down doing a lot of that here in the next couple of days, trying to get my boxes organized and restocked and make sure that we've got good stuff to take, since it's a 2-day show. So I might get around to watching Love and Thunder. I might not. I might wait till it hits Disney Plus. I don't know. But here we go again with another thing that drives me crazy, is that you guys are agenda pushing again, right? So Marvel comes out and says to everybody, this is the gayest movie ever in Marvel. Well, considering that 3.5% of the population identify as the group that you're going after, I would only assume that that's the majority of the people that you care to come see your movie. Because if that's the case, the majority of the people that would normally go see this movie are going to be out. Right? Like, why would I go spend $15 to $20 a person to go watch a film that is clearly geared for not me? I mean, the characters that you guys are portraying, and this is the other thing that really gets me right now, is that at one point, acting was, you are a person who is an actor and you are trying to portray said character. So you adapt you to the way that that character is, and that is the character that you're portraying. Well, now we have people like whatever the girl's name is that plays Valkyrie says, and then they had this problem with Supergirl and everything else. Well, I am whatever. I think she's bisexual or whatever. So if I'm that way, Valkyrie needs to be this way. Nope. You are an actor. Your job is to portray a character, not project yourself into the character to make the character more like you. I have said this since comic book movies have started. People like the characters in the comics. They like that property, and they want to see that content in a film. I don't care if you take the exact same story arc and you do it panel for panel in every line the same way that it's in the book. That's what we want to see. We do not want to see your interpretation. Your interpretation of said character as an actor takes away from the content. Okay? I know I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, and I'll probably say it 100 more times. These characters do not belong to an actor, to a director, or whatever, whoever's working on the project. These characters are owned and loved by the fans and the people that love them already. Okay? It is your job to do the characters justice. Not your job to make a change to a character to make it more like you. Simple. If you can't do that, then in my opinion, you have absolutely no business being involved with this property or that project. Now, I say this again to a lot of other comic book people who write comics. There is a place for your interpretation, and it is an Elseworld story or an alternate reality story or whatever you want to call it. These are the places where you can take Batman and make him a vampire, or, do Miller's Dark Knight stuff. The prime mainstream continuity is not your playground to make changes to these characters. These characters are well established and have been that way for many years. We know who these characters are, we understand how they act, and we want a good story with these characters. We do not want you changing the fundamentals of these characters in order to accommodate your personal view and or beliefs. If you cannot understand that character, if you do not believe that it is worth making that character the way that it is supposed to be, and making sure that it is back to home base and makes sense with how the character was originally conceived and the ideas which behind that they were done, then I don't need you on the project, because you just write a bad story and make it unbelievable. Think about that for a second. My perfect example right now is Wally West. We get a story called Heroes in Crisis, which was a good concept. Because, you got to think that if these heroes were doing these jobs day in and day out, and they go through a lot of stuff, and some of them get pretty beat up, and We lose some people every once in a while and that sort of thing. I mean, dealing with the loss of a friend or a relative or a loved one or even a pet is rough. You may not be ready to go back out tomorrow if something bad happened yesterday. Sometimes you get hurt real bad. So what did they do? They made this place called Sanctuary where these guys could go, try to decompress, relax if they needed therapeutic help or whatever, that they had professionals on hand to help them out. And it was there, a place for people to get through and help them get through tragedies and things if they needed this type of help. Well, they sent Wally West there because Wally had been trapped in the Speed Force for 10 plus years. And his family doesn't exist anymore because of all the changes to the timeline. So his wife, his kids, everything gone. Yeah, I'm sure that would be pretty rough on you. But then they make him out to be a villain and having him kill people because he thinks that he can go back in time and kill a bunch of people and make himself feel better. I don't know. This story still doesn't make any sense to me. So we make him a villain and kill a bunch of people all of a sudden, and then it's like, oh, well, the version that went back in time and killed all these people were, because he went back and killed all these people, we don't know what happened, but there's a version now that's just sorry that there was a version of him that killed people that wasn't the same one. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense at this point. But we had to vilify him. One of the beacons of hope of the entire DCU. One of the guys that, no matter how bad it got, he pushed through and he just kept running. Because that's what he knew how to do. He kept going, and So now we have Wally West, the villain, who is part of Sanctuary, who goes through, kills a bunch of people. Now he's a villain, right? So what happened with Wally was significantly different than what happened with Hal Jordan. This is why I'm okay with what they did with Hal to an extent until they decided to bring him back. Versus what happened with Wally. Wally just out of nowhere becomes this guy who time travels and kills people and then doesn't remember that he did it, or they killed an alternate version of him that did and is still guilty for doing what he did or whatever. That story is still convoluted enough that I don't quite understand exactly what happened without reading it 6 or 7 more times. But during the reign of Superman, Hal Jordan was fighting along Superman against the cyborg Superman and Mongol. He gets into it with Mongol real hard. Especially in the one issue that was the tie-in to that. And, he gets beaten up pretty bad. Hal ends up suffering a broken arm and all this stuff. And during the conflict in the battle, Cyborg Superman and Mongol have destroyed Coast City. I mean, wasted. Just completely devastated Coast City. So everybody that Hal knew and was friends with and cared about all died in this battle. So what happens to the sole survivor of a city? And a guy who is now going to say, had I been faster, had I been better, I could have saved it. And that is probably true. He probably could have stopped it if he would have been aware of what was going on. So, due to the grief that he suffered, he kind of lost his mind. And I say kind of, and I mean in a big way. He lost it. So he goes to the Guardians of the Galaxy, which is the group that governs the Green Lantern Corps and is the reason that they all have powers and everything through their rings. And he says to these guys, you guys have the ability to bring them back. You have all this power to bring them back. I need you to bring them back. They say no. Hal says all these people were murdered. They were innocents. You don't understand. You got to do this. They still tell him no. So Hal decides that if they weren't going to do it, then he was going to take the power and do it. So after murdering several Green Lanterns, and on his way to the home planet Oa to take the power to bring this city back, the Guardians were so afraid of him that they basically committed mass suicide, with the exception of about one of them. Hal ends up destroying the power battery and taking it all for himself, leaving all the Green Lanterns powerless. So if there were any of them flying through space at the time, they lost their power and they died in the vacuum of space. So Hal becomes a villain called Parallax and is obsessed with fixing this. Goes through a whole deal that was called 0 Hour, where he tries to reset time in order to bring Coast City back and to make it so it never was destroyed. We see Parallax a few times throughout the next few years after that plan was foiled, and there was a thing called Final Night that shows up, that in the end there was a Sun Eater that was destroying the sun, and Superman was losing his powers, and the Earth was getting colder. It was going to destroy the whole Earth because there wasn't enough sunlight to sustain the heat, and everything on the planet was going to die. So Hal, with the power of the Green Lantern Corps, flies into the center of the sun and uses that power to restart the sun after the Sun Eater had tried to suck all the juice out of it, basically. So he basically re-energizes it, killing himself in the process. A final act of redemption. I would have been perfectly fine had they left Hal Jordan dead, and that was his final act, to try to atone for the atrocities that he had done. Because still somewhere deep down in there was still good. So what do? They decided to make him the Spectre as penance for his crimes. That lasted a while, and his Spectre run was really, really good. And then Jeff Johns decided to bring him back and blame everything on an infectious yellow bug called Parallax that was just the infection of fear inside of the guy that caused him to do this. So Hal Jordan's no longer responsible for his actions, which is garbage because that takes away the humanity of the character. So their fix for Hal Jordan was ridiculous, but the fall made sense, and it was a good story, and it was a tragic ending for a character. But you know what? We as people have tragic endings sometimes. And it made it human, and it made it a good story. It's a sad story, but it was a good story. And then we cheapened it by blaming it on something that was out of our control. But that's another show for a gripe from against Jeff Johns and his terrible writing. But even in the end, I mean, with the Hal Jordan story, there was a glimmer of hope at the end, right? Like he comes in and he really saves the day, and I mean, granted, he dies doing it, but he restarts the sun and everything's good to go. I don't think there's enough content pushing this idea of hope for tomorrow. There's really not. I mean, if you look at most things that are considered entertainment, they're pretty dark. They're pretty rough a lot of the times. There was a moment in the season finale of season 2 for Superman and Lois that I didn't think I would hear either. In the previous episode, there was a moment where Superman could have let General Lane die, and he could have taken out the villain before some other crazy stuff happened, and maybe have saved some extra lives. And when General Lane brings this up, Superman says, "No, every life is worth saving." And then he gets up and walks out of the room. So, this is a message that we've now picked up a little hope in the Superman show. We've seen this pop up now in Kamala, Miss Marvel. And there are little shreds in some of the books every once in a while that pop up and say there's a little bit of hope. So I guess that's the point of everything that I wanted to talk about today, really. Is that regardless of how bad everything seems, there's no point in looking too far at the despair of things. I mean, this content and these things and what they should be writing for and should be teaching kids or whoever else is reading the content, and what we're striving for is hope for the future. This is the entire basis of Star Trek. That we come together and look at tomorrow and say, it'll be better than today. And like I said the last time, truth, justice, and the American way. I don't know how else I can tell you that. That, to me, is one of the all-time greatest phrases of being hopeful for tomorrow. And without having that aspiration in a book or something to make me feel that we're going in the right direction, that even if it doesn't work out, we're going to fight and we're going to keep doing what we have to do to make tomorrow a better day than today. We're going to have setbacks. That's only natural. Life is rough. I don't know why. It's not my place to know why. But the point is, keep working hard. Do what you can do. Help everybody that you can help. Aspire to be better. Just like old Billy Batson used to say, before Jeff Johns got a hold of it. Do good, and good will follow.